Welcome to the White Sox REKAP Podcast. I'm Ryan McGuffey. Well, now what? The White Sox traded their ace, Garrett Crochet, to the Boston Red Sox and have a massive void in their starting rotation. Who fills it? How do they fill it? Can they do it in 2025, or will it take longer than that? We go down to the minor leagues. Yes? Well, not necessarily, but to the guy who has more knowledge about the guys coming in 2025 and beyond than anybody. John Eli, local guy, former third-round draft pick of the Chicago White Sox, and most notably the 2024 pitching coach of the Birmingham Southern League champion Barons. Brian Anderson's back in studio with me. He joins me as well as we get a deep dive on how to fill the void of Garrett Crochet on this edition of the White Sox REKAP Podcast, and it starts right now. Time to welcome in. I like to call him the Albuquerque Professional Baseball Hall of Famer myself.
That's one way to put it. Yeah,
we have the 2024 pitching coach of the Birmingham Barons, local guy, local product, former third-round draft pick of the Chicago White Sox. John, appreciate you being here. We have you on for a ton of different reasons, but obviously with Garrett Crochet being dealt to the Red Sox, there is a massive void at the top of the rotation and just in the rotation in general. We know where the team and the organization are right now as a whole. Coming off a 41 and 121 season, some of the guys that you spent a lot of time getting to know and develop got time this year in Chicago, and I want to go through some of these specifically, but just your overall impressions of the Garrett Crochet trade to start, because you got to see this kid when the White Sox drafted him become a top-line starter. Really kind of, it surprised all of us. It surprised me that the guy was opening day starter. He had 73 career innings, and now he was probably the golden nugget ticket in terms of trade availability here in the offseason.
Yeah, I mean, I got a lot of opinions on this trade. And number one, I would say that this is a trade that has to work out for the White Sox. Yep. But, you know, especially going in, they did capitalize on this trade pretty well. We got some solid return, especially out of a guy that we didn't know what was going to happen, putting him in the rotation. He wanted to be in the rotation. We, like you said, only had 73 innings kind of leading into this, and it was kind of a okay, let's just see what's going to happen type of thing. But he answered the bell, and obviously he kind of proved himself to be one of those guys that can be in the front of a rotation and at any given night go toe to toe with anybody's ace. So now that you have that, it's like, okay. My personal opinion, I would have liked to have kept him, because I know some of the guys that are coming up behind him, to having that rotation together would have been a scary 1-2 and possibly 3 punch.
You hear that? Did you hear what you just said?
I did, but I'm going to tell you, like, you understand the how baseball works. I mean, it's timeline.
Realistically, though, we needed. I mean, they needed hitters. We needed offense.
Right.
Okay. I think the return was pretty solid. You're looking at one of the top catching prospects in Teal in baseball. I mean, this kid is going to be pretty good. You have Quiro, who I already know can hit. I worked with him last year. This kid can swing the bat, and he's gotten a lot better catching. So now we got depth at a position that we haven't had depth at in a long time. Even to dig deep in the well, you even got Michael Turner behind them, and this guy, one of the scrappiest, toolsy guys. Like, he's still learning how to catch as well. So there is some depth there. That being said, it's hard to find a guy that is an ace. Yeah, you know what I mean. So
that's the part that makes you want to keep him, obviously. Yeah,
right, exactly. Yeah, it's like you. It's hard to you take a lefty with a good slider like Crochet, and you can beat a lineup. It's platoon neutral. He's funky. He does some really cool stuff with the baseball. You do have some guys coming up. We'll dive into those prospects that are coming up and everything else.
No, John, so one of the things Guff and I used to go back and forth with, right? Like, we agreed he probably needed to go. Like, in order for the organization to thrive as a whole, big picture, we agreed Crochet had to go. The part, to your point, that I just told him all the time, I was like, the thing that sucks is you start to look at some of these guys like Dylan Cease, Chris Sale, Garrett Crochet, like, these guys don't come around very often. And when you have a wipe out, shut down number one ace, you're like, damn, dude, like we have to get rid of this guy again. And it's like, and understand it doesn't.
It's frustrating. It's frustrating. It's like it starts, and especially for fans, I'm sure out there kind of listening to this, it gets exhausting. It's like, when does it end? Where does the big buck stop? You know, it's how many times are we going to have to go back to the well? Why don't we just pay these guys? You know, like that, and that was kind of our, like, at the end of the day, but you pay discount prices, you get a discount team. So, you know, you keep these guys. Like, imagine that rotation. If we had Dylan Cease, and I'm not gonna. Hey, look, I don't want.
We went down this.
No, do it. No, do it. I want to do it.
So I don't want to dog the trade because we got some, like, Thorpe and Iriarte are studs. I think Thorpe is going to figure it out. He to me is pretty comparable to a Giolito, but he can do a little bit more with the baseball. If I know there's some people that are worried about his velocity, but I've dealt with this kid and he's an absolute savage. I think if he's 93, 95. You see Giolito with a better breaking ball mix because he's got the cutter, right? If he's 91, 92, though, now he's going to have a hard time getting through lineups second, third, fourth time through when he sees the Indians again, when he sees the freaking Tigers for the fifth, sixth time this year. You know, that's going to be a little tougher, but he can do a lot with the baseball, and the changeup is really special. I wouldn't compare it to mine. I don't know if it was quite as good as mine, but I like to think it's pretty good. Iriarte's huge ceiling, but you still, like, you had Dylan Cease.
Yeah.
You had Garrett Crochet. You had Giolito. You know, you had these guys. If you go down the list and you put Noah Schultz in that mix, now when he's coming up, all of a sudden, like, what did we sacrifice? Like, these guys have to start panning out in order for these things to make sense, and I think they will. But it's gotta happen.
But you're right. This trade will define Chris Getz's tenure as GM of the White Sox. But to your point, and you mentioned it a few minutes ago, you got to have guys 1 through 9. You could shut out guys all day long. You could have Garrett Crochet followed by Dylan Cease, followed by Lucas Giolito, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But if you're a historically bad offense because your 1 through 9 aren't getting it done, that's where the White Sox, and you're part of this. You've been a big part of the development of a lot of these guys that have unfortunately been traded, and now you're part of a second rebuild. It is frustrating for White Sox fans, and it is the PTSD. It is the, oh God, we just traded Chris Sale again to the same team that fleeced us the last time.
They keep getting our dudes, man. It's unbelievable.
John and I have talked about this at great length. Like, nothing's a bigger clubhouse killer. I mean, culture, that's bad, right? But nothing's a bigger clubhouse killer than when your pitching staff's just hanging up zeros or they're cruising through the fifth, sixth, and you look up and you're like, we're losing 1-0 again. Like, you have to be able, like Eli said, you have to be able to have something to give your pitchers to be like, hey, wow, look at that. 3 runs in the first inning. Guys, I got you. Like, we're good. Like, I'm going to get you through the 6th inning with less than 2 runs. So
yeah, I mean, did you see what that quote from Garrett Crochet was to Scott Merkin last week after the trade? He's like, I don't know how many times I drove home last year and looked and was like, what the fuck just happened? Like, I felt like, how many times did we talk about that? Yeah. Like, are you serious? Like, here, okay, they're finally going to get off the schneid. And then it's a 3-run 8th, a 2-run 9th, and the ball game's over. But all right, so let's rip the Band-Aid off of some of this. You've mentioned a couple of guys. You know, the obvious names. I think when you're in the position the White Sox are and you're trying to replace Garrett Crochet or fill that void, first of all, I just don't think, like, it's easy for me to say. It's not easy to do. You're trying to find another ace now, as you know. Like, that's what's so hard about the Major League Baseball draft. You guys are both – you both went through it, right? 1st round pick, 3rd round pick, both of you, high draft picks. Go back in your drafts and look at how many guys made it. And I'm talking about, like, legit, we're in the league 3, 5, 10 years. Dude, you go through every draft. It's a reason why there's 4 number 1 overall picks in the history of baseball that are in the Hall of Fame, because it's super hard. And the White Sox nailed it with the 11th pick in Garrett Crochet. And that's the frustrating part, is that 4 years later, you're like, all right, go win a World Series elsewhere. We're starting over again. Yeah. So, in terms of starting over, you mentioned Schultz. The White Sox fans know about Noah Schultz. They know about Hagen Smith. We saw Cannon. We saw Thorpe. I want to talk about Iriarte a little bit more, but let's start with the big guys, literally and figuratively here with Noah Schultz, who's the 16th overall prospect. in all of baseball. You got your hands on him last year in Birmingham. Who can he be? What can he be? And will he be here in 2025?
All right, so I'm glad you brought that up. And if I had to speculate, I don't think he'll be up there in 2025 because we have to build his innings back up. Last year we had a 4-inning pitch count, which was something that had to happen because he could have handled it, but you're coming off of an injury. You're not going to push a guy, especially when he's that high of a prospect with the ceiling that he has. And what I want to get, you just mentioned we knocked it out of the park with Crochet with the 11th pick. He actually far surpassed the expectations I think that we all thought he was going to go, especially as a starter, because like we said before, we didn't know if he was going to be a good starter, but he ended up being, for me, this is bold of me, but I've worked with him, and I do believe Noah Schultz fills that void and could potentially be a little bit better. And the reason being, and I'll explain myself here. I know that's because that's tough. That's tough to just throw out there, but I'll explain myself. Crochet he featured 2 pitches that were really they were extraordinary. Well, Noah Schultz has those 2 pitches plus 3 more.
Wow.
He's got we were able to develop some really cool seam effects with his changeup, some really cool seam effects with his sinker. Got some more depth on his slider, which his slider is better than Crochet's.
Wow.
That's a big.
I know. Look, shoot me. Like if this ends up aging poorly,
dude, I'll find you.
If this ends up aging poorly, you can come and find me. That's fine. I'm in Lombard right now. I'll be here most of the time. But I'm telling you right now, this kid is good. He has a chance to fill that void. But it's a couple years out, probably a year and a half or so out, and then he still has to have that kind of acclimation period that everybody does once they get to the big leagues. But I'm telling you, like mid-upper 90s with a sinker end, and we developed a cutter that's in the low 90s. We developed a 4-seam that he can run up at the top of the zone from a pretty low arm slot with his really funky delivery. Like he's ass, elbows, and ankles coming at you, and all of a sudden it's 98. And
I think, in the last 5 years, John, it was trending on the upward tick on my way out.
Yeah.
But I remember Harold Baines pulled me aside, Hall of Famer, right? And he said, he goes, I got to give you guys credit, man. Like this cutter thing it's the equalizer. And he goes, I can tell you, looking at you, he goes, that pitch would have given me problems. And you start to see the better pitchers, the Jacob DeGroms of the world, really incorporate that 92, 93, and then rip a 98 in there. And so anytime you have a kid, especially you know how I feel about you from a developmental standpoint, you've had the opportunity to work with such great players. They've all been successful. But my gosh, like you look at these kids and they start ripping in these 93s in there. There's no more 95 mile an hour fastballs to get ahead. It's a 93 mile an hour cutter with some major tilt on it. So.
Yeah, I mean, that's some good. And, usually in the past, you haven't seen a ton of guys with the high. I mean, 6'9", talking about Schultz here.
Oh, she's 6'10" and a half now. He grew an inch and a half last year.
What?
Yeah.
He's 6'10" and a half?
Yeah. It's unbelievable. He grew since spring training. He's grown an inch and a half. I think he's bamboo. So,
I mean, outside of Randy Johnson, like tall pitchers have been, that's been an issue. Like John Roush was a top prospect with the White Sox and eventually figured it out because he was so damn tall. How is he able to? I mean, I'm being serious about the 6'10" and a half thing. How do you have to, when you're developing a pitcher that's that tall, do you have to do anything different to contain that? It seems a strange question.
Yeah, so I guess it's not a strange question. It's actually a pretty good question. It's basically just not trying to get him to move the way you want him to move and letting him move the way he needs to move, right? He's funky. He's a little across his body. Don't try to fix that. Just let him. And he's very athletic. That's the coolest thing about him. He had he had a PFP, a pitcher's fielding, right? So It was his first start, and he was shutting down Montgomery, I believe it was, one of the best lineups in the minor leagues. There was a swinging bunt down the line. It was almost to the chalk on the third base line. He went, grabbed it one hand, and jumped through the guy out by about 3 feet. And I looked, I was like, this kid looks like he should be unathletic, and he moves like a point guard. Like, I'm like, this is pretty impressive.
Crazy.
So you just let him be himself, and you just lean into the curve of what he does really well. You know what I mean? And just stay for a certain part of it, just stay out of the way, but also just get, kind of screw with his grips and do some other stuff to let him be really good.
Yeah.
Okay, so Hagen Smith, obviously, the first draft pick this year for the White Sox 2024. I know he didn't spend any time with you, and I don't even know how much time your video, if you even watch him because it was in season. But do you have any? I mean, he's obviously, when you're a first-round draft pick and you get thrown right into the top 50 prospects in baseball, you come with a spotlight and a high ceiling as well. Do you have any kind of hints as to who or what Hagen Smith can be, or you just didn't get a chance to get that much on him?
I actually didn't get much of a chance to see him at all, and I was really pleading with our head of our PD department and our pitching coordinator Matt Zaleski to maybe bring him up to Birmingham so we can use him for an inning here and there in the playoffs. But it never actually worked out. He said no, he's going to be right there in Winston where he belongs. Everything that I've heard from the guys that played against him and from the people that have kind of helped him develop in the short period of time we've had him, he's the real deal. He sounds like he could be the real deal. His fastball's electric. He's got some deception. It's like I want to say somebody compared him to like a Bumgarner almost. It's like it's a funky slot. He does some cool stuff with the ball. I can't speak to it too much because it'd be irresponsible for me to try to diagnose him. But from what people are saying, there's another potential guy that could be an impact pitcher in the major leagues.
Yeah, I mean, I had to ask you about the two of them because they come with they're getting all of the attention.
Yeah,
and rightfully so when you're the first.
Rightfully so, yeah.
Yeah, rightfully so. But I want to ask you, the Dylan Cease trade. I hated that trade too, with the idea of what it meant. But because I love Dylan, I've gotten to know him really well. But again, another trade that kind of had to be made because of where the White Sox were. Everything to me right now on the surface says like it's a really damn good return. You talked about Drew Thorpe, but I want to talk about Jairo Iriarte because I feel like he's kind of gotten lost in this entire shuffle. We only saw him for like 5 or 6 innings in the big leagues. I know he walked a ton of guys. I think people were just done at that point in September. People weren't watching much. He got a taste. He got his cup of coffee. But what kind of pitcher is Jairo Iriarte? Is he a starter, first off?
We're trying to figure that out. I think that he's got the ability to be a high leverage starter. If we figure there's a few things we have to figure out with him, right? Is what's his fastball? Like what is he going to be? Is he kind of lost his slot that he was in when he was with the Padres, where he had this really high call strike whiff rate, right? And obviously he didn't throw enough strikes because kids was 19, 20 years old when we were looking at it. Now he's 21. So let's pump the brakes on okay, I didn't think he was ready to be called up when he went up because of the fact that he was still kind of figuring out a few things, trying to figure out where his fastball was. He made some strides towards the end of the year, working on his four seam, getting it back to that kind of lower release slot where he had a little bit more induced vertical carry, had a little bit more extension on the fastball and a little bit more velocity and more sustainable velocity, right? But when they called him up, he just wasn't throwing enough strikes, like we talked about, because we were still figuring out what he is. I know the slider came a long way. It was in zone a lot more, had a lot more swing and miss. I would say that if and the changeup as well. Changeup is kind of an X factor for him because it mirrors his slider really well. He can tunnel those extremely well. But until he figures out his fastball, he's a bullpen arm. Once he does, and if we can see if there's a four seam and a sinker in there, if he can figure that out and throw the ball over a little bit more consistently, then yeah, I'd say starter. But out of the bullpen, you're going to look at a high 90s fastball that has some pretty solid extension.
Eli brings up a really good point. We've talked about it a few times in here. The White Sox are in a really unique spot, right? Because they were so bad last year, whereas like prospects like you and I were coming up through the system, right? We're like, hell yeah, we're getting called up, right? So that's the tough part is the player, a Noah Schultz, right? Or that kid wants to get called up and he's like, and John Eli is going as the pitching coach going, God dang it, man, he's not ready yet. But how are you going to tell some kid you're going up, right? So you have to be supportive and you have to get his mindset into saying like, hey, man, you are able to get outs in the big leagues. But again, and Eli brought up a really good point. He goes, the fastball, what is it going to look like? And that's the first thing that triggered my brain is because I go back to Ozzie Guillen. Ozzie Guillen's like, man, You could have the nastiest shit on planet Earth. If you can't locate a fastball and you don't throw strikes, I don't care. Get back down there, go hang out with John Eli, and I want to see your face until you can figure it out.
Yeah.
But, we've been talking about that little sweet spot. It's like with Schultz, right? It's like you're not ready yet. And that's not a dig on him. He's not ready yet. He's got some things to iron out. But you know what? They got rid of Garrett Crochet. This is the most opportune time for a career minor leaguer or unbelievable prospect to get called up and get an opportunity right now. It's like, who's going to take advantage of that?
Yeah, that's a good point. One thing I wish we would have done a little bit more of last year, because juggling the roster situations, I mean, you know how hard that is to do. Like, so you can't really fault the moves that were made outside of a couple, possibly. Like, I'm not going to throw jabs at anybody, because I'm not a GM and I don't know how to manage those situations. There's a lot of guys that were performing last year that didn't get chances to go up. But it's kind of like the message you send if you don't call up the guys that are actually performing, especially when the team is that, underperforming that much.
You guys are stacked. You guys are stacked.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's deflating, right? Like, also you're looking at guys like Addison Coffey, Garrett Shanley, that have sub-1 ERAs. Garrett Shanley has like a sub-1 through, and his swing and miss rate, his strikeout rate was through the roof. He's a lefty with a slider that is throwing 95, that just pumps fastballs at the top of the zone and never falls behind, right? How do you tell this kid, hey man, just hold off? But Addison Coffey, who was one of our second best reliever outside of Shanley in the league, or in our organization last year, dealing in Charlotte. You know how hard it is to pitch in Charlotte?
Yeah.
That place is a
you give up some homers there.
Oh my God. You can get some cheap ones out there. Yeah. And he was out there figuring it out, dealing. At some point you got to say, dude, throw these guys a bone. And that's what I think you have to find a way to do when you're underperforming at the major league level. Now I can't speak to that because I know how difficult it is to juggle the roster, like I just said, because you don't want to lose somebody, because at some point you have to either designate somebody that maybe you think is a piece in the future, or you have to put somebody on the DL that is, maybe we need moving down the line to see what he can do so we can figure it out. So it's difficult, but at the end of the day, let's find out what we got. Because we know the guys like he said, Brian, Schultz, Hagen Smith, these guys that are coming up, they're going to be a part of the team. They're going to be a part of the future. So let them develop, and then give these guys that are just performing a chance. And then all of a sudden, maybe they come a piece that we can trade or we can use. Yeah.
How much of a voice I know you said, you're not a GM, you're balancing roster, but you also don't want to get in a situation where you're rushing guys, especially at this point in the White Sox rebuild. I mean, you're at ground floor laying a new foundation, like from the start. You just bought the land. That's all you have is the land. It's not like when Garrett Crochet was drafted and the White Sox were like, let's get him to the big leagues right now from the alternate site because we are trying to get to the postseason. Did that hamper Garrett Crochet's development? Arguably. Yeah. I mean, he did not like pitching out of the bullpen. He told me that all the time. He hated the way his body felt. And that's why he loved the every fifth day thing, is the way he knew how to recuperate his body. So what is the fine line for a guy like you who spent your entire coaching career in development at the minor league level, knowing exactly what these guys were going through, what was working, what they were learning, and then going, hey, do you got a guy down there that we can bring up? How's Schultz look? How's Bush look? How's Eater look? And you're like, shit, man, I don't know if he's ready, but you also understand the phone call too. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I didn't get a whole lot of those phone calls. I was just told. I'll be honest with you, man.
Were you able to at least be like, hey, man, okay, he's going, but I don't know.
Those conversations happened between me and Katsy.
I'm not even in the organization. I'd send Getsy my opinion all the time. He'd write back a thumbs up.
Yeah.
No. Then do the opposite.
Well, look, the good thing is that our at least on the pitching side, I know for a fact the guys at the top of our PD department, like Zaleski and Bannister, they're very active within the minor league system. So it's not like it's unfounded that these guys are going up without a ton of advice from boots on the ground. But
right,
I would like a phone call every once in a while to kind of throw it out there. But I also understand
you have 15 of our best pitching prospects. What do you think? Absolutely.
No. Yeah. Do you have an opinion?
Sit on the butt.
Right.
No, but you brought up a really good point, man. it made me just think about that. I haven't given that too much thought, especially like Guff was saying, right? You bought the land, the foundation is being set. Like while the Schultz and the Hagen Smiths are developing and you nurture them along, yes, they're high round picks. They're top prospects. Their path is accelerated. Ours was, yours was, right? Until you got traded. Sorry about it. But the path for a first, second, third round pick is accelerated. But man, like you're right though, from an organizational standpoint, from doing right and doing a good service to your players, it's like while we nurture those top elite guys, you got to call up those guys that have 1 ERAs and pitching in a hitter's ballpark, and then AA. You got a lefty throwing 95. Like you got to give him a cup of coffee and see what he can do. And what's that telling them? You got a 40-win team, and you're not calling them up. So.
Yeah. That was kind of what I was jabbing at, and I'm not trying to. Like I said, I'm not throwing shots here out of the freaking trenches, but
I'll throw them for you.
Yeah, I'm really not, because I know how difficult it is, and Getsy's a bright dude, and he's a phenomenal human being as well. But I'm never ever going to try to go out and tell somebody how to do their job. And that's not what I'm doing here. But for me, like I've had a couple of conversations with these guys, with Addison and Coffey especially, who just really did an incredible job of anchoring a Charlotte back end of the bullpen that needed some help at the point in time. Yeah, he figured it out, and there's something to be said for guys that are just continuously figuring it out at level to level, even if their fastball metrics don't match up. I know he's got the velocity, but maybe the induced vert doesn't make sense. Maybe the NBAA doesn't make sense. Maybe something in there doesn't make sense. But if he's figuring it out every level, at some point, dude, come on. Like let's give him a shot on a team that isn't performing. I get it if you're in a playoff race and you're trying to win every game, and there's no sense in rolling the dice unless it's September. But in this situation, for me, you got to start rewarding guys that are doing extremely well.
Former big league pitcher John Eli, the 2024 Southern League champion pitching coach, I should say.
Right.
Yeah, the Birmingham Barons. A few more minutes with us. I want to respect your time. I know you got some workouts to go to. I mean, look at the guy's wearing a shirt here, and I can't. I'm feeling like I work out every day, and I'm like, Jesus Christ, man!
Having to long talk. Guys, now he's got biceps.
I feel pretty good about myself, and I'm sitting here. No, John, a few more questions for you, and I'll ask. I'll throw two names at you, and then I want to get more of a 30,000-foot view, like big picture, maybe some sleeper candidates that White Sox fans aren't necessarily focused on. Real quick though, about Kai Bush and Jake Eder. What do you like? What's their ceilings? Can they be rotation pieces? We saw, kind of a little bit of both, I think, in 2024.
Yeah, no, I like that question, actually, because those are two guys that I absolutely love. Kai Bush is one of the funniest dudes you ever met in your life, man. He's just the driest sense of humor, and he'll take jabs at us from a coaching staff, and we can hear it from the end of the bench, and you just sit there and chuckle because he's spot on. But it's a guy like him, I think. Originally, I would have thought if he could have figured out that cutter that we were working on in spring training, maybe he's a back end of the rotation piece. But he is a guy, I think, that can stabilize your bullpen, go multiple innings out of a one-inning stint from here and there. Like he does have 96, 97 in the tank in a one-inning appearance, right? The off-speed package, it's not special by any means, but it plays off of everything really well. You know what I mean? So like his whole package as a total with kind of his arm action, his short arm action, and where it comes from and how fast and deceiving his delivery is, he's got a chance there to be a guy that can give you 2 to 3 innings out of the pen every few days, and he's a horse. The kid is have you seen this kid in person?
Yeah.
He's built like a freaking house.
Yeah.
Like in a good way. Like he's an absolute unit.
The unit?
Yes. Oh, yeah. And he is a dog on the mound, dude. So there is a chance there. I think he's a bullpen guy for me. Eder is kind of the same situation, but he's just got to throw the ball over the plate. If he could throw the ball over the plate, he'd be a starter based off of the way he's able to move his breaking balls and based off of the way he's able to throw. He has kind of a Noah Schultz changeup when he throws it the right way, right? It's a seam shifted changeup. He's actually got the capability to throw a seam-shifted sinker. He just has to refine, okay, let's start get this done. Let's get this over the plate. What's my next best off-speed pitch, and how consistently can I throw it where I want to throw it? It's got to be in the zone a little bit more often for me. Once he does that, if he's capable of doing that, then that Jake Berger trade looks a little bit better. Because right now, like until he does that, Jake Berger is
that guy. I have never seen. I don't know if SportsCenter was just trying to rub it in, but for about 6 months, all I saw was Jake Berger highlights.
Burger bombs
after he got traded. I'm like,
yeah, you know about that trade, right? The trade that was made because Kenny had the right to make 2 trades without Rick's approval.
Oh my God.
I'm being dead serious. He had first rights on the Yankees and the Marlins. Kenny Williams made that trade on the trade deadline day. Like, yeah, like that's. I've put that out there. That's like.
I'm not gonna dog Kenny.
The more you know, it was not one that made.
Kenny.
Yeah, well, yeah, he's gone now.
Yeah, it is what it is.
It is what it is.
I'm not gonna dog him. He's a good dude.
No. He's 2005, right? 2005. Yeah. 2005.
Lightning in a bottle, baby.
You have to remind yourself that every night. You're like 2005. Then you can go.
It was so. It was such a fun.
Now, is there a separate? Like, you have your wife next to you, but is the ring got its own little spot in the bed too? So I think you're the one.
Let's try that today. I'm supposed to bring it in. My bad.
All right. So let's flash forward to, like, let's say 2027. I know I'm going to ask. I'm going to get a sleeper pick here in a minute, but it's 2027. We don't know anything about free agency. 25, 26 draft picks, but we're just going to move as if it's 2027. And you, with the guys that you've seen and worked with, and the knowledge you have, you're putting a rotation together for the 2027 White Sox. What's it look like?
That is a tough question to answer, man. That is a really tough one to answer because you got some guys coming up, and we didn't even touch on Juan Corella, who was just protected right before kind of a deadline right here.
Yeah,
Juan Corella, if he's able to stay healthy, which he has been healthy, but he's got some kind of knee issues, staying into his backside. But when he does, he's Luis Castillo. Like, I'm telling you, this kid has got some stuff. Like, he's 96, 97 when he stays in the backside.
Rephrase this. White Sox bring you back as the pitching coach in the big leagues. Scott Merkin or Ryan McGuffey. Ryan gorgeous-sized McGuffey.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, fire me up.
Listen, spring training's breaking. What is your starting 5 rotation? Give me 5. I want 1 through 5 right now.
He just, I love that you're just putting him back on the spot. So he just named Luis.
Fine. Okay.
Luis Castillo.
Noah Schultz is in there. He's 1 or 2. Okay. I think you got somewhere in the back end. You got John Cannon. I haven't
even asked you about him.
I love John Cannon. Is a stud, dude. He's a stud and he's a competitor. So I
love that kid's compete, by the way.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, and he's does some special stuff with the ball, man. He's got a kind of a Paul Skeens mix, but just without the same velocity.
Yeah.
But he does the same. It's the same action on the ball, once he learns how to. Well, either way, moving on.
So there's 2.
Yeah. The rest of it is so tough. I want to put Thorpe in there because I think he'll figure it out. I really do.
Is he too serious? You know what I mean? Like, he just looks like he's not having that much fun. I know that's Kyle Hendricks never looked that way either, but that guy pitched his ass off.
No. Once you break the kind of crust around Thorpe, he's kind of.
But can that impact us?
Cool
Is he thinking too much?
No, he's very smart, right? He's extremely intelligent. He does a lot of his own research on teams. Like I kind of tried to stay out of his way as much as I could in Double-A because he already kind of. It was almost boring for him at that point. He was like, I had to remind him several times, like, dude, you're part of the rebuild. You're going to be in Chicago, and it's not going to take that much longer. And I do think because of how cerebral he is and what he can do with the baseball, once he realizes, okay, this is where I have to throw it, then I see him as a guy that can really bolster maybe that 4 or 5 spot in your rotation and give you 200 plus innings a year, right?
Yeah. So that's 4 pitchers you've named.
But now I'm so I don't know enough about Hagen Smith to say anything else. But you also have Logan Taylor. You also have Logan Taylor coming up out of the minor leagues. Like if he can stay healthy, he's got 100 miles an hour consistently in the tank. Like there's some guys down there. Juan Corella could be in that mix. Like that. I'm trying to think.
So I'm going to help. So do you think I'm going to cut this question off because we talked about the position players. Yeah. I feel like, look, there's one thing you cannot argue, and you've been a big part of it. the White Sox develop pitchers. They do. Aces, 2s, 3s, 5s. Yeah,
no big deal.
No MBD, baby, no big deal. There's 24 names that we could put in the big leagues right now that are developmental pitchers from the Chicago White Sox, and you're naming more. You're struggling trying to find 5 guys to fit in a box because you have 12 names, and I get that. Do you think at some point, maybe in the very near future, that the White Sox deal from the position of strength that's been developed and try to acquire more bats for that 1 through 9?
Well, that's what the Crochet trade was, right?
But I'm talking about even more in like the high end arms that they have in Double and AAA, and even coming up to the system. Like it almost feels like maybe Drew Thorpe. I'm just throwing names out there. No one, Cannon, Thorpe, anybody that you're developing along the way. It's like, dude, this guy looks like a legit number 3 going forward.
That's not an unfounded kind of idea right there, man. Like, you see what these guys are able to do, and there's so many unknowns. You look at the starting rotation going into next year. There's about 13 days of service time amongst all of them, right?
That's unbelievable.
So like we're doing the same thing where it's like, okay, everybody's got to pan out. We think we know what we got.
Yep.
So let's just kind of roll the dice. If you think you can get something and you can get a mainstay piece, like a middle of the lineup type of hitter, I mean, why not? But you also have to realize at some point we're gonna have to pay for them.
Well, that's a different podcast. We're going to do that.
We're having the same conversation in 3 years.
All right. So quickly before we let you go, I got 2. If you have any, obviously jump in. But who's a pitcher that no one's talking? I went through some of the bigger names, but who's a guy that you think will make an impact? Will make an impact on the 2025 Chicago White Sox?
I think if he gets a chance, Mason Adams. I think Mason Adams is a guy that if he gets a chance and nobody's really talking about, he's a 13th or 14th round draft pick a few years back that under recent regimes was kept in Arizona for a little bit outside. Like last year for me, he was probably the best pitcher, most well-rounded pitcher on my staff in Birmingham. Let's put it in perspective. He got called up to AAA with like a month and a half left in the season, and he still ended up in the top 10 in the league in strikeouts on the year.
Wow.
He was, like his breaking ball, he is like, I don't know that he's a starter. He was a starter for me. I don't know if he can maintain that. He's going to have to improve his strength and some stability issues that he's got. But if you put him in the pen right now, I told Cassie this too. You put him in the bullpen right now, he's John Cannon out of the bullpen.
Yeah. Love that name.
I'm telling you right now, he has the same mix with a little less average velo. But the kid is got a breaking ball package that is just electric, and he throws everything over the plate. He'll throw anything in any count. You look at his splits; he's 30%, 30%, 25%, 25%, 25%, and it's in every count. So it's not like he's getting in unfavorable counts, and then here comes a fastball that I'm just beating up minor leaguers with. He's dropping sliders in. He's dropping curveballs in. He's dropping seam shifted changeups in. He's throwing 4 seams at the top of the zone, and he's sinking it front hip. This kid can fucking pitch. Sorry.
I know you're excited about that, aren't you?
I am. I'm jacked up.
Yeah,
all right.
I would say that if you put him in the bullpen right now, you can bridge to the 8th inning, 7th, 8th inning.
Damn.
And I would say Addison Coffey's in that mix too, just because I think he'll figure it out. And he's an absolute dog, and he looks like a Southsider. I love this kid, dude.
It's like you.
Yeah, kind of like me. I guess I'll take that.
All right, as you know, Sox fans are pissed, they're upset, they're frustrated, they're apathetic. You understand it. Everybody should. I mean, 41 and 121, having to go through a rebuild, getting really nothing out of it, and here we are again. But you could feel your excitement, through the screen here. You can about what's coming. Why should White Sox fans, at least from a pitching standpoint, be jacked up about the next 5 years?
All right, look, there's nothing I can say that's going to qualm any White Sox fans' nerves. Because there's been a lot of disappointment, and no matter what I say, I actually did a interview with Feinstein. It's like, and I saw the comments on it. It's like, oh yeah, I've heard this song and dance before.
Yep.
Well, you know what? I get it. You just got to wait and see here. But there are some real arms, some real kind of things coming up the pipeline, at least on the pitching standpoint. We got some serious arms coming up. Yet, do they have to develop a little more? Do they have to prove it? 100%. Be a little bit patient. I think we got some, like, especially Noah Schultz and Hagen Smith, potentially, some of the other names that we talked about too. If we can figure out a way to kind of balance that, and at least one of those guys is going to pan out, and in my opinion, several of them will, because they have what it takes as far as we know what major league stuff is supposed to look like that works in the zone. These guys have it. They just have to realize how to use it, and once they do, it's going to be there's a chance there where we could look really good on the pitching standpoint, and even from a offensive standpoint, you got some pieces now. Like, this trade works out. Dude, Teal is a dog, man. That kid is good, and you got that Montgomery. I think that outfield.
Braden Montgomery, yeah.
That kid,
that guy.
Unbelievable.
I said
that's a stud.
They literally just threw him in like the top 50 rankings because they didn't know, and because he was hurt with the ankle injury in the World Series. They're like, we know this guy's a top 3 to 5 pick, and because we haven't seen him, we'll just throw. That guy could go from 54 to 20 by the midseason.
Easily.
He was at Stanford. When he was at Stanford, I was at Arizona. He's a freshman. He threw 1,000 from right field, and he came in and threw 97 against us. And they're like, that kid's a freshman. He's got one of the best baseball bodies I've ever seen.
Yeah.
He's incredible. He looks like Luis Robert. He's bigger.
All right, last one for you. And maybe we'll get you on down the line, because I want to ask you more about, development and culture and velocity and stuff. Maybe we can do that on a future podcast. But we were surprised last year when Garrett Crochet's name was thrown out there in spring training as the opening day starter, not knowing, look, as of right now, you mentioned the 13 days of service time. I've heard like Jose Quintana is a possibility in terms of a free agent. If that would make sense, but yeah.
I wouldn't hate that, man.
I wouldn't hate that at all.
Presence, Jose Quintana was one of the best human beings I've ever met.
I love the idea of something like that, but because he's not here yet, you're naming an opening day starter for 2025. Who is it?
John Cannon.
Dang, I love it.
John Cannon. Why not? He proved he could do it.
Yep.
We don't know a whole lot else about whatever everybody else is going to do. Give me John Cannon day one, and let's roll.
Boom.
Let's roll, baby.
I got to leave with this one thing, because there's a kid that played for you, John, who I had the luxury of facing as a coach when I was at Arizona.
Are you going to say Tristan Stivers?
No. There's a kid that played for you in AA. Impact. He's going to be in the big leagues. He's going to have 15 jacks. Tim Elko.
Oh, please! Can we please talk about Tim? This is a whole nother podcast. This kid, if it was me, man, he's up there next year. He should have been up there last year.
So I'm gonna make a call right now. I know you agree, and he was all jazzed about it when I told him. He's going to have a monster spring. He's going to run into 12 balls.
He always has a monster spring, though.
He's going to break.
He always has a monster year.
He's going to go DH, first base, toss him in left field, give him 300 at bats in 20.
Why left field? Just let it. Dude, they don't have a DH.
He's not gonna be in left field, dude. He's going to be So I'll give you a little stat here. I'll give you a little stat here. So in Birmingham last year, obviously we had a pretty good infield, and it was our best defensive infield. But a lot of it was because of Tim. We had 50% less throwing errors across the board, in like half the throwing errors of every other team in our entire organization, and it was because of Tim at first base.
Dang.
His ability to pick. I know he's huge, but he picks it.
He takes it.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Half the cut in half the throwing errors from the entire infield that every other organization, every other team in our organization.
Yeah, that's why Konerko never got enough credit for how he could pick it.
Unbelievable.
Oh, no.
Yeah, he couldn't move. He had to throw it within like a 3-foot radius of him, but he'd pick it. Hey, John, we appreciate you coming on, man. This has been awesome. I think White Sox fans are going to get a much better perspective of how to fill the void that almost seems unfillable of Garrett Crochet, but there's certainly enough in the pipeline. And, we'll get you on again. This is good stuff. I know you got to go get your swole on and get some other kids. Get some other kids that you're training as well.
8 and 9 year olds to go corral here and then teach them how to throw the ball straight instead of backwards. It's going to be great.
Awesome. Appreciate you, John.
Yep, absolutely. Thank you.
See you, brother.
All right, BA. Just outstanding stuff from John there. I mean, I give credit to you. You introduced the two of us, and you were like, "Hey, man, if Crochet gets traded, like this is going to be someone worth talking to." He had his hands on all of these guys over, not just like this year, but the last couple of seasons. Some of these names that we're talking about, the big names, the guys behind the scenes. He just won the Southern League Championship with some of the high-end arms for the White Sox. A lot of nuggets in there. I mean, there's so much. I ran out of room to write because he just kept raving, and not just about Noah Schultz being better than Garrett Crochet. He's got so much knowledge in there. I'm glad that we got it out.
Well, they usually say, even when John was pitching and I was playing, right, they say the AA pitching coach or the AA coach has access to the most information because all the prospects cruise through that Southern League, right? So I spoke to him a few weeks ago, and I'm thinking to myself, every pitcher you and I have talked about, he's like, oh, yeah, this guy can do that.
Yeah.
Oh, this guy's got this breaker. And I'm going, maybe I just remove myself from the podcast and insert him here. But it was incredible. It's tough to find someone that has that much insight on every single pitcher.
I mean, and like literally worked with them just months ago. Yeah. And here's the other thing I like fair and honest, right? And when you give a guy's name, he didn't just sit there and go, well, he can be a starter. He can be a starter. No, he's sitting there going like, this guy's a horse, and I think he can be a really good multi-inning reliever. Yeah, I think that's good. Like they shoot straight, put it out there and say like, he could be a long-term number 4, number 5, but he needs to throw strikes.
Well, you can see from the podcast, right? He's not afraid to let the pitcher know, like, hey, man, you do X, Y, and Z really well. We got to work on this. Yeah. You're not able to land that first pitch breaking ball. And that's why pitchers love to pitch for him and love to work.
And that's why he's not saying anything publicly that he hasn't told them. Sure. Right. So that's key. Hey, man, I wanted to put this out right before we sign off here. One of the things I'm appreciative of 2024, it's been a weird year, like for me personally, just with my career and stuff, but I'm so happy to be here with the recap. I'm very thankful that we've started this podcast, the two of us. We've been longtime friends for literally like 20 years. And, I wanted to get you in the fold. I think it's important for you to reconnect with White Sox fans. And you have so much knowledge yourself. And it's a very reflective time of year for me. I try to like be appreciative in the weeks. I wish you nothing but, you and your family, happy holidays, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year. And I'm just very thankful that the two of us get to pair up. Look, we bust chops, we bust balls. We do that all the time. I like that we can do it here too publicly because, you and I think have a long-term future ahead here. And I think we are just cracking the surface. I'm excited about 25.
Appreciate it, man. Same here. I'm grateful for my family, but grateful for this opportunity, and I do it for free.
Oh, man, if you guys only knew the meaning behind the joke. So that'll put a bow on this edition. Figure a gift to you. Deep behind-the-scenes knowledge from John Eli about the White Sox pitching prospects and what's to come in 2025. For Brian Anderson, I am Ryan McGuffey. We wish you guys happy holidays, Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, as we continue on and get closer to 2025 to figure out what this White Sox season might look like. This has been the White Sox Recap Podcast, and we'll see you next time.